Subcommittee on Energy and Water will come to order. Today's hearing is going to review the fiscal year 2022 budget request for the Department of Energy. And of course, that includes the National Nuclear Security Administration as well. Ranking Member Kennedy and I will each have a brief statement, which I'm in the process of making, and then we'll recognize each senator for an opening statement if they wish to make one. We will then turn to Secretary Granholm to present testimony on behalf of the Department of Energy. Welcome, Madam Secretary. It's good to see you again. At the conclusion of the witnesses' testimony, I'll recognize senators for 5 minutes of questions each, and the usual procedure. Secretary Granholm and you, Dr. Verdon, for joining us today. Thank you again. I'm particularly pleased to see the Secretary, who got her start at the University of California, Berkeley, was a Golden Bear, and later returned to the school as a faculty member. So your California roots are there, and I thank you for them. I'd like to just quickly begin by a statement on the fiscal year 22 request for the department, which totals $46.2 billion. This represents a more than $4 billion increase over 21, and that's a lot of money. I applaud the administration's resolve to follow California's model and act aggressively to combat climate change. We are experiencing a climate emergency today, and California is on the front line of this crisis, as evidenced by worsening droughts and wildfire. So we need to find those solutions that can reverse climate change, if that's possible, and promptly respond to climate-related disasters. The budget requests makes investments in the fields of basic research and scientific discovery. We face an increasing challenge from China, which is seeking to supplant the United States as a leader in technology. And so this also must be addressed. This budget's investment in research and development includes a $414 million increase for the Office of Science to make certain advances in priority areas that put quantum information science, exascale computing, and artificial intelligence and machine learning. We should, I think, go even further in funding these important areas. I'll put the remainder of my statement in the record, but we'd like to proceed. So if I can, let me welcome the witnesses. Oh, Mr. Chair, sorry. Let me welcome my ranking member.
Thank you, Madam Chair.
You.
I'll try to be brief. Mr. Undersecretary, welcome. Madam Secretary, welcome. I don't know whether to call you Secretary or Governor or General as an Attorney General or Professor. I think I'll stick with Secretary. I'm not going to concentrate as much on the arithmetic today because I think we all know the president, whatever president, submits a budget and Congress kind of does what it wants. I shouldn't say Congress because I don't know how the House works. I've learned a little bit about how the Senate works. Senators are like cats. They do what they want. Sometimes it works out, sometimes it doesn't. But we're in the process of putting together a budget, and I don't think I'm going out on a limb by saying it'll be different than the president's submission. It's not personal to President Biden. That's always the case. I want to say a word about our energy policy. I know a lot of departments touch on it, but I'm pretty much an all-of-the-above energy type guy. I believe in fossil fuels. I believe if we can produce wind and solar efficiently, gosh, we ought to pursue it. I believe in hydrogen potential there. Thermodynamic or hydroelectric potential, and nuclear. And I mean it, I'm kind of an all-of-the-above guy. I just think we ought to pursue whatever works and whatever is most efficient. I'll just make 2 quick points. I get concerned about the administration's hostility toward fossil fuels. I do. I think, not all, but I think with many members of the administration, it's more of an emotional reaction than a rational reaction in my judgment. As a result of natural gas, we're one of the few major countries that has reduced our carbon emissions. And that's just a fact, and we did that because of natural gas. Some people who believe that we need to, well, they believe we need to start over with our energy policy and get rid of fossil fuels. And if we do that, it's going to be pretty expensive. And I think for a fraction of the cost, we can try to make our fossil fuels cleaner. And I'm talking about carbon capture, storage, and utilization. And it makes sense to me to pursue that. And I think a rational person will pursue that. Now, somebody who sees climate change, I don't mean to be, this is in a pejorative sense, but somebody who sees the climate change issue as a religion is probably not going to look at that. But I don't think that's rational. Point 2, I think nuclear can be a part of our mix. It's expensive, but it's clean, and it's much safer. And I hope we can talk about that a little bit today. I watched with amazement when Mrs. Merkel in Germany, who I think has done a pretty good job of running her country. It's not my place to say, but I've got an opinion like everybody else. But I looked in amazement when she got rid of all of her nuclear and said the solution to our energy needs is to buy the gas from Russia. It never made sense to me, but I guess none of us are perfect. But I wanted to share those thoughts with you, and I hope we can talk about some of them today, and welcome to both of you.
Thank you very much. Senator Hyde-Smith, Senator Hagerty, if you'd both like to make opening statements, and obviously the woman first, please.
Thank you, Madam Chairman, for that opportunity, because I would, and I will be very brief. But thank you to both the witnesses that are here today that will testify. And Madam Secretary, as you are well aware, energy issues continue to dominate the national agenda. And as Senator Kennedy spoke, you know, it is very much talked about right now, and in a concerning way to me as well. But as appropriators, it's our responsibility to find ways to keep up with the world's ever-extending energy demands, and while also increasing our capacity and our security here at home. And one way that we can expand our power capacity is to increase the use of nuclear energy in America, in my opinion. And I'm proud to highlight that the Grand Gulf nuclear site in Port Gibson, Mississippi. And I hope nuclear energy will play a larger role as clean, efficient energy source. And I've always supported energy diversification and the development of energy sources that will expand our supply. But Mississippi has a diverse energy portfolio, but I believe it is critical that we recognize the important role fossil fuel resources will play in meeting the demands of Americans. But fossil fuels such as coal and offshore and oil and gas, they have been a main source of power for this country. And it is crucial that we find new ways to increase the potential by making fossil fuels cleaner, as Senator Kennedy mentioned, and to use them, but to not eliminate them altogether. That is a great concern of mine. Thank you.
Thank you. Senator Hagerty, would you like to make an opening statement?
Thank you, Madam Chair, and I appreciate the opportunity. Ranking Member Kennedy, thank you as well, and I appreciate your comments. I'd just like to echo Secretary Granholm. We've talked about this, but echo the points raised by my colleagues that our energy security is a critical element of our national security. As we've discussed before in my previous role as U.S. Ambassador to Japan, I worked very hard to get our allies to work with us, to be our partners in energy security. America's energy independence is a vital component of our national security, and I think that our allies benefit from our ability to actually export energy to them so that they're not reliant on countries like Russia. And as I mentioned to them on numerous occasions in Japan, we're not only talking about exporting energy, we're talking about exporting freedom. So the national security elements of this, I think, are critically important, and I'm very dismayed about the posture that the administration has taken against fossil fuels. The prices at the pumps today have gone up significantly. I'm from Tennessee. We commute in our state, and the average person has seen prices at the pumps rise more than 50% since the Biden administration has come into office. This is a tax on our middle class. It's a tax felt by all, and it's going to create great economic pain. Even if it's not included in the CPI, every good's got to be transported in America. This has inflationary impacts that go well beyond the immediate strategy, I think, to make fossil fuels less desirable and create an economic subsidy for alternative fuel. So I'm for all of the above in terms of energy strategy. I'm pleased to be from a state like Tennessee that has a great background in nuclear energy, and I look forward to talking more about Oak Ridge National Lab when I come back to questions. Thank you for being here.
Thank you very much. Senator Merkley, do you want to make an opening statement?
No, Madam Chair, I think I'm happy for us to proceed. Thank you.
And Senator?
No, I would like to talk about energy efficiency, which I think is one overlooked energy source, but I will save that for my questions. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Secretary Granholm, please make your opening statement, and we welcome you here.
Great. Thank you so much for inviting me to testify. Thank you to Chair Feinstein and Ranking Member Kennedy and to the other members of the subcommittee. It is truly an honor to serve as the 16th Secretary of the Department of Energy and to make comments about the President's 2022 budget request for the Department of Energy. I'm very pleased to report that since January 20th, we at the Department of Energy have taken important steps toward the department's priorities. Our budget request obviously would help us to further the activities that we've already begun. So far, we've invested $1.5 billion to strengthen our national security and to accelerate progress toward a net zero economy, and much of that has gone toward improving and deploying existing market-ready solutions, setting new goals, for example, to cut solar in half yet again, adding 30 gigawatts of offshore wind capacity by 2030. So that's existing, but at the same time, we're supporting breakthroughs in clean energy. So our new Energy Earthshots initiative will set a series of ambitious, achievable targets for commercializing emerging zero-carbon technologies. The first one, Senator Kennedy, you'll be happy to know, is our hydrogen shot, and that is setting a goal of getting the cost of clean hydrogen down to $1 for 1 kilogram in 1 decade. And I'd also note that last week we announced $12 million funding opportunity to advance direct air capture technologies. And yesterday we announced a new $61 million investment on nuclear energy, which was distributed throughout the country. 30 states, 99 entities got money to advance research in advanced nuclear technology. Both of these are priorities that have been outlined in the budget proposal as well. So, Chairwoman Feinstein, these droughts and these heat waves and these wildfires that are plaguing the West and straining our energy system remind us yet again, of course, of the need to enhance our power grid and expand resiliency on that grid, especially to all forms of extreme weather. And that's why we announced in April that we're making $8.25 billion available in loans to improve our nation's transmission systems. And of course, the ransomware attacks on Colonial Pipeline underscores the need for investment in cybersecurity on our nation's energy infrastructure as well. We are engaging with the private sector around strategies for hardening the critical infrastructure against ransomware and these evolving 21st century threats. We're also strengthening our energy security through a multi-agency effort to bolster domestic supply chains, like for lithium batteries that we need for storage and for electric vehicles. We released a report and a series of actions on this exact topic a couple of weeks ago. Since January 20th, our Vehicle Technologies Office has already made $362 million available for projects that advance battery technology and reduce emissions from light and heavy-duty vehicles. So we're proud of our work so far. We're grateful to this subcommittee for making this work possible through last year's appropriations, and we look forward to building on the progress. And let me just say, we know that if Congress were to pass the American Jobs Plan or an iteration thereof, we would be able to exponentially expand on that work. But as the chairwoman noted, in the meantime, our budget request would invest $46 billion in these key priorities, including a 65% increase in our Office of Energy Efficiency and Renewable Energy, and a record $1.8 billion for our nuclear energy program, which will, of course, all help us to deploy clean and cheap power on a reliable and resilient grid. The budget would also support greater research in clean energy and carbon reduction at the national labs and usher in greater diversity in the STEM fields. And here I want to thank the Senate for passing the U.S. Innovation and Competition Act, which authorizes the department $17 billion in support of our efforts to keep the country competitive in a global economy. And that funding, coupled with our budget request, is going to help the department and our 17 national labs put America at the forefront of clean energy innovation worldwide. And of course, the budget would also strengthen the department's nuclear security mission, and I'm so glad that Dr. Verdin is here to talk about that today, and our environmental management program, for which we've asked for one of the highest levels of annual funding, and that would facilitate progress on our cleanup sites. All told, these all represent a down payment on a cleaner and more prosperous future, but one that will not truly be fulfilled without that American Jobs Plan, the infrastructure bill that y'all are negotiating, which would position our country to compete in a global clean energy market, and it would confront the climate crisis and create millions of good-paying jobs. And it would also, I would say, lift up disadvantaged communities, including tribal nations and communities of color that have been historically burdened by pollution. And I would say this, too, it would provide the department, it would bolster our department's ongoing efforts to provide fossil energy workers with real opportunities to forge careers in cleaner fossil and clean energy, and that's what it means to build back better. So I know the request is large. We do believe the need is urgent. DOE will use the funding effectively, if appropriated, to tackle these big challenges. I'm humbled by the opportunity to lead the department, and I look forward to working with you all and happy to answer any questions you may have.
Dr. Verdin, my understanding is that you are here today to answer questions, and if that's satisfactory, fine. If you wish to make a brief statement, we'll entertain that now. Okay, thank you very much. Let me then begin the questions. Madam Secretary, this budget puts a heavy emphasis on deployment of climate solutions. There's $2.5 billion, or a 45% increase in funding across the department's applied energy programs compared to FY21, and a $400 million request to create a new Office of Clean Energy Demonstrations. Could you please explain to us, with as much detail as you can, how these new funding requests will translate into more clean energy development?
Sure. Thank you for the question. You know, we know that there are a lot of technologies that are on the shelf and that can be deployed. And so your question about deployment is a key one, as well as demonstration. Those are the latter two stages, obviously, in the development of these clean energy technologies, and we should be really doing everything we can. So, for example, in the budget, you'll see an almost 1,000% increase in the Federal Energy Management Program, and that, of course, helps to guide and ensure that all of our federal agencies are deploying the best solutions for reducing our federal carbon footprint. And that is a significant priority of the Biden administration, to make sure we lead by example and make sure that our procurement also creates a market for clean energy products that are made in America. So that's a big example of deployment that we intend to do. Second, we see a significant increase as well in the Weatherization Assistance Program. That is a deployment strategy as well. We'll be able to weatherize thousands more homes using, again, we hope, products that are made in America, again, creating markets for American businesses to be able to provide for weatherization of homes. In the budget as well, we have a component that is providing grants, state-based energy grants to states. And those energy grants will be tied, again, to making sure that demand is created in those states for clean energy products made in America, but also to help them achieve higher standards, whether it's on clean energy standards or on building codes, et cetera. So we want to reward the states and localities for taking action, and that's also a deployment component that's in this budget. Bottom line is you'll see this big plus up in all of these lines. We have a whole deployment strategy for each of them. That's just 3 examples.
One other quick question, if I may. Congress included $20 million in last year's appropriations for consent-based siting of nuclear waste. This is something that concerns me a great deal, and I'd like to ask if you can briefly elaborate on how you intend to break the stalemate on nuclear waste disposal and what you plan to do in the near term to move that forward.
Yes, as I know you're aware, there was a 2012 commission on nuclear waste, and that Blue Ribbon Commission recommended a consent-based siting strategy, and we are beginning that process this summer. We will be issuing a request for information. Obviously, the states or localities that are willing, because we want to work with them, who are willing to be able to house this waste, it will...
I don't mean to stop you.
Yeah.
But what I'm asking for is, what is the administration's plan to deal with nuclear waste?
That is the plan, is to get another site, not Yucca Mountain, but to get another place that is willing to be the home of nuclear waste. Obviously, it will require some compensation for that local entity to be able to do that. There is some interest out there. We just have to make sure we complete this consent-based siting process, and hopefully near-term rather than long-term.
And when will that be developed into a proposal?
Well, the requests for information are going out within the next month, and so hopefully in the fall we'll have a sense of what the landscape looks like, but this year we want to solidify the strategy.
Thank you. Senator?
Thank you, Madam Chair. As you could probably guess from my opening comments, Madam Secretary, I see the climate as a discrete scientific issue. I think it's a mistake to approach it with too much emotion. Passion is good, but not when it interferes with your judgment. I've got a couple of 30,000-foot feet questions. How much money in public and private dollars does the department think it would take to make the world carbon neutral?
I don't have a number for that, but probably a lot.
Yeah. Hundreds of trillions of dollars, you think?
It would be a lot, for sure.
How much money in public and private dollars does the department think it would take to make the United States carbon neutral?
Again, it would be a lot.
Hundreds of trillions?
I don't know about hundreds of trillions, but it would be a lot of money.
It'd be in the trillions.
Yes.
Mid-trillions.
I don't know.
I understand. Here's my question. to make the United States carbon neutral based on the administration's plans, I think it would be fair to say is going to cause displacement, major displacement. Now, I don't use that in a pejorative sense. I think that's just an accurate description. It's going to change our economy dramatically. Many people are going to gain. Many people are going to lose. And that's what I mean by displacement. If we today spent these, to be fair, tens of trillions of dollars that I think many members of the administration would like to spend, and make the United States of America carbon neutral, and nobody else adopts our aggressive approach, and they only make modest gains in CO2 emissions, how much is it going to lower the world temperature, and how much is of it? How much are we going to reduce carbon emissions?
I want to say that the administration has a really firm commitment to communities to be able to take advantage of the economic opportunity.
I know, Madam
clean energy,
Secretary,
and that
forgive me
means
for
workers,
interrupting,
too.
but we both know now, I really want to try to probe your mind here. We both know this is going to cause major displacement. Let's don't kid each other. You're not going to turn coal miners into coders overnight, and you're not going to turn fossil fuel workers into solar experts overnight, and there are not as many solar jobs as there are oil and gas. So I don't want to get off into that. And I'm not trying to be critical of the administration, but these are important questions. If we become carbon neutral and we don't get cooperation from China and India, what have we accomplished?
The goal is to get cooperation from China. And
I know, but what if they don't?
Well,
What if we go spend these tens of trillions of dollars, and President Xi Jinping, the people of China are wonderful people, by the way. President Xi lies like he breathes. We know that. The Communist Party, they're gangsters. What if they? They've probably built a coal-powered power plant while you and I have been talking. What have we achieved?
the administration has a strategy to make sure that all of the people who have signed on to this Paris Agreement meet the goals that they have articulated. And that means working with allies, and that means a strategy
I get it,
to ensure
Madam
that.
Chair, but I'm asking a very practical question. My son, who I love dearly, has a strategy to have his dad buy him a 911 Targa Porsche. It's not going to happen. And I'm raising a very legitimate question, I think. If we spend these trillions of dollars and we go through all this displacement and we don't get cooperation from China and India, what is the pain worth the gain? And how do we know?
I would say we have a strategy to get those countries on board. And if we don't pursue this strategy, what then? Then you have climate disasters that are upon us. California could be on fire again this summer. And if we don't take action, then where are we with respect to the other disasters? So we have to approach our allies
Let me ask you one last question.
and do our own.
I get it.
Yeah.
If you can indulge me, Madam Chair. If we spend all the money that the Biden administration wants to spend, let's take in its current infrastructure bill to reduce CO2 emissions, what percentage of the increase in carbon emissions worldwide, not the United States, is going to be reduced?
Well, all of these countries have signed on. All of them have.
No, I'm talking about, I know, and you're trusting them. But
Well, no,
I
verify.
believe in metrics.
Yeah.
If you spend a lot of taxpayer dollars, you ought to know, first of all, what you expect to get and realistically assess whether you're going to get it. I don't want to let me ask you one last question. How come your budget doesn't request any funding for the Yucca Mountain licensing?
The the administration doesn't support Yucca Mountain as a solution for nuclear waste.
Okay. Thank you, Madam Chair.
Thank you. Senator Shaheen?
Thank you, and thank you, Madam Secretary, for being here today and for all of your hard work. And Dr. Verdon, we're delighted to have you here as well. As I said, I really want to talk about energy efficiency because I think it's the stepchild of energy use. It gets short shrift, and yet it's the cheapest, fastest way to deal with our energy needs. I was really glad to hear you talk about reducing the federal carbon footprint because the federal government is the biggest user of energy in the country, and we've got to do a better job. I would start with the architect of the Capitol and see if he can't get climate controls in all of the rooms on Capitol Hill because it's ridiculous that we can't control the temperature in the rooms in this building and throughout the Capitol. So that's just an aside. But one of the things that I would urge you to look at is the scoring for energy savings performance contracts, ESPICs. When I was governor, we were able to significantly reduce the cost of heating our buildings and save on carbon emissions because we used ESPICs. And yet the way we score those here is a cost, not a savings. It is nuts that we don't recognize that we can bring in private contractors to do that and save us significant dollars, and yet when we do it, the scorers charge us for that rather than looking at savings, and that's why it's so difficult to get done. But I want to go to the budget because this budget calls for $16 million for building codes within the Building Technologies Office, and we know that our buildings use about 40% of energy use in this country. Percentage-wise, that number is a big increase from the $10 million provided in 2021. But it's still a relatively small program, and when we know there are substantial energy savings being left on the table, it seems to me that that's an area that we ought to really take a hard look at. So can you talk about what we could do if we can increase that amount in terms of energy savings?
Yeah, thanks so much for that question and for your leadership in this energy efficiency space. This is a plus-up for this, and we want to be able to take it to the next level with respect to not just the federal buildings, but state and local buildings, and assist those state and local entities in how they can achieve greater efficiency with new building codes, upgraded building codes, which we're in the final process of putting out through our Building Technologies Office. But you are right that it is a drop in the bucket. And if, for example, we were able to achieve the kind of investment that is seen in the American Jobs Plan, for example, that would allow us to really push this much further, providing incentives to states to really up their game on building codes and allowing us to up our game on advising and giving the technical assistance that is necessary to all of these local units of government to do the same. And as we know, I agree with you on your ESPICs, but this whole thing is such a big job provider, upgrading the building envelope footprints.
Absolutely.
A huge opportunity for putting people to work.
And as you point out, building codes are really a low-hanging fruit that we ought to be taking a look at, and it's disappointing to me that we've seen efforts in Congress blocked Congress after Congress by the home builders who don't want to spend a small additional amount, which over the lifetime is going to really provide savings to consumers. I want to talk about appliance standards also, because the appliance standards program has saved consumers tens of billions annually on their utility bills. By 2030, it will have avoided a cumulative 7.3 billion tons of carbon dioxide emissions. That's an amount in excess of a year's worth of emissions for the entire U.S. economy. So going forward, updating standards could save an additional 1.2 to 2.9 billion metric tons and achieve cumulative utility savings of another 1.1 trillion by 2050. That's according to the American Council for an Energy Efficient Economy. Unfortunately, we saw the previous administration did not keep pace with the statutory deadlines to update appliance standards. So can you talk about what the status is of your review of that and where you expect to go to make sure we get back on track with respect to appliance standards.
Agree 1,000% on this as well. We have, I think, so far filed over 50 notices in the Federal Register of rolling back the rollbacks, essentially, and continuing the progress that is made. You listed a number of statistics in terms of savings, and for the average family, just on the basics, it is about $400 per year, and then you add another $400 perhaps for LED lighting. You can see significant savings from these on a very granular basis as well. We are completely committed to progressing significantly on the appliance standards issue.
Well, thank you. I look forward to working with you and the department on improving support for energy efficiency in the country.
Thank you.
Thank you, Madam Chair.
Thank you, Madam Chairman. Madam Secretary, the Gulf of Mexico is one of the nation's most important regions for energy resources and accounts for a large portion of our crude oil, our federal offshore natural gas production. What efforts are being taken by the department to advance cleaner technologies for domestic fossil fuel resources?
Yeah, we have a program that really works with the private sector to ensure that the existing production is both efficient and clean as it can be, including making sure that there's integrity at the wellbore, making sure that produced water is clean, et cetera. And we are going to, that's under our Fossil Energy Office, and we will continue to work with the private sector on making sure that that happens, even as we transition to more, not just fuel efficient, but electric vehicles, et cetera.
Thank you for that answer. And I'm addressing my next question to both of the witnesses. And as I mentioned earlier, Mississippi is home to the largest U.S. nuclear power reactor in terms of generating capacity. And with the administration's heavy agenda on cutting carbon emissions, what do you believe are the most promising nuclear efforts in our nation right now?
First of all, I agree with everything that has been said about nuclear, that nuclear must be a part of our strategy to reduce our greenhouse gas emissions, and that we also should be doing everything we can to keep existing nuclear plants online. And we also need to be doing research into advanced nuclear demonstration projects, which we are. Our nuclear request in the budget is significantly more than last time. I want to say it's maybe 28% or something like that above last year's effort, because we want to continue to work on these advanced nuclear designs, the modular reactors, the small modular reactors, as well as making sure that we can assist in whatever way possible to keep these plants online. Let me say, our budget doesn't subsidize existing nuclear plants that are already running, but you know, if in the infrastructure package that's being negotiated, there is, or at least in the American Jobs Plan, there was a provision to help keep existing plants online, and as well as making sure that nuclear is part of the clean energy standard, both of which would be significantly helpful for ensuring that we continue to keep the existing fleet operating as well as create new.
And Dr. Verdon?
I think the Secretary covered it, and nothing more to add.
Okay. Thank you, Madam Chairman.
Thank you, and so good to have you here, Madam Secretary. Following up on my colleague from New Hampshire's point about energy efficiency, the fiscal year 20 appropriations bill required a study to lay out the investments needed in energy efficiency and conservation, to give us kind of a comprehensive view to help us guide legislation. And we haven't received that report. The Trump administration dropped the ball. We've been in contact with your department about it. Can you pick up that ball and help us get that clear understanding?
It was an energy efficiency study. I'm not
Yes.
read in on it, but I will definitely get back to you on it
In conservation. Thank you.
in conservation.
Second, my colleague from Louisiana talked about displacement. I saw displacement firsthand last year when we had fires sweep through the west side of the Cascades, and town after town was burned to the ground. And if it was like walking in on towns that had been firebombed in World War II or something. It was just incredible. And we are seeing a huge impact on our rural communities from the impact on forests, on farming, and on fishing. And so I just wanted to note that displacement is real right now, and not just from the fires in Oregon, but also from all kinds of other economic effects that are taking place, and more severe storms. So those costs are going to be extraordinary, and it's only by the U.S. setting an example and then working in partnership with the world that we have some way of turning the curve on this. I was very disturbed at the increasing pace of carbon saturation in the atmosphere. We hit a record last month of 419 parts per million, way up from the 180 to 280 parts that characterized the last 800,000 years. We haven't been this level for 8 million years. The planet's in big trouble. I just want to keep emphasizing that. I know you understand that.
Thank you for that.
Thank you. Turning to a piece of that, the Clean Electricity Standard, do you think natural gas should be included in that standard?
I think that if you combined natural gas with carbon removal so that it really was clean and that you had zero carbon emissions, then it could be.
But only under that condition.
Yeah.
Under conditions that it's not carbon capture just to redeploy it in gas fields where it will leak out, but true absolute capture.
And sequestration, yes.
No. Thank you. And I doubt the costs of that are going to be less than the costs of renewable energy from solar and wind plus battery storage, if you will. So I'm certainly hoping that we don't create some false solution. If research on it, great. Pursue it if it's economical and it's truly effective. But that's my concern. I am excited that Oregon is pioneering the use of electric tractors. So 3 of them in operation. I invite you to come out and see them in operation. And trying to figure out how electricity can start to be used in places where diesel has been used is another piece of this frontier of conversion. And can DOE support efforts like that on new uses of electricity?
Of course, 1,000%. That's what we do. In fact, as I speak, I think we have a funding opportunity request out for off-road vehicles. Tractors would qualify for electrification.
I think you're going to see a request in that regard from my state. Turning to plastics, plastics aren't reduced, reused, recycled. They are burned, buried, and borne out to sea with huge environmental consequences. Because plastics are primarily a stream of natural gas, because the natural gas system leaks enormous amounts of methane, because methane is an incredibly powerful global warming gas, plastics are a climate problem as well as a direct problem for human health, and a direct problem for ecosystems. I just wanted to raise this and see if you have some thoughts on that topic.
The administration is looking at this methane issue very seriously. You're probably aware there was a vote and a reversal of a rule that was lessened in the last administration on methane. It is obviously this is in the EPA's jurisdiction in terms of the regulatory side, but in terms of the technology side, we want to be partnering to make sure that oil and gas companies, 1, do monitoring of methane leakage, and 2, do closing of methane leakage. And this whole issue of methane is extremely high on the priority list, both of the Department of Energy and of the EPA and of the Biden administration as well. So stay tuned on that for more.
Thank you very much, because I think it's an under-recognized part of the challenge, and is inherent in a system with millions of miles of joints in pipes, as well as abandoned wells that leak, never properly sealed, and so forth. And I know the administration is working on that, so thank you. I'll just close by shifting to nuclear weapons. People forget that nuclear weapons are a huge part of energy portfolio. And we haven't had the nuclear evaluation, the nuclear posture review yet, but the administration has put forward in its budget funding for the W-76 low-yield warhead, a warhead President Biden called a bad idea because of its impact on potential nuclear war, and also on the B-83 mega weapon, if you will. And we're not talking about small dollars. We're talking about the administration proposing $100 million to fund the program. I hope that many of these projects, which seem to have kind of a nuclear industrial complex momentum, get evaluated very, very carefully, both because of their cost and because of their risk.
Well, clearly, because as you've noted, the nuclear posture review is just starting. That will be looked at. They will be looked at. But I'm wondering if Dr. Verdin has any follow-up on the two specific programs that you mentioned.
Yeah, both programs will be looked at as part of the posture review. But right now, we had to put forward.
You have to turn on your mic, I think.
It's not on.
There you go.
Both will be looked at as part of the posture review, and we put forward the budget that was required by the current program of record to support the weapons that the STRATCOM commander identified were necessary. So that's why they're in the budget right now, but they will be examined. The whole portfolio will be looked at.
Thank you.
Thank you, Madam Chair. And again, thank you, Undersecretary Verdin and Secretary Granholm. I appreciate your being here today. As I mentioned in my opening remarks, I'd like to turn our conversation to Oak Ridge National Lab, which is the largest multi-purpose energy and research laboratory that the Department of Energy supports. It is a true gem of Tennessee. $5.6 billion of economic impact every year is the estimate. Some 34,000 jobs are supported by Oak Ridge National Lab in Tennessee, touching 50 of the 95 counties in my state. So it has an incredible economic impact, and I think a tremendous impact on advancing our nation in terms of basic research. Beyond the great work that happens in Tennessee on nuclear energy, which I look forward to working with you on, I'd like to talk for a moment about supercomputing. And one of the critical missions of Oak Ridge National Lab is the Summit supercomputer. It's the second fastest supercomputer in the world, and I'm very pleased that Oak Ridge is going to unveil this year an exascale computer called Frontier, which will be the fastest in the world, right in my home state of Tennessee. And we've talked about this before, Madam Secretary, but I'd like to join with my colleagues, Senator Blackburn and Congressman Fleischman, to invite you to come and visit us at Oak Ridge National Lab to see what's happening there and to deepen our working relationships so we can continue to make these advances. I hope you'll be able to find time in your schedule soon to join us there.
I would very much like to do that, especially with the unveiling of the exascale computer, and I know that that's scheduled for early fall, and I'm excited about seeing the incredible complex that's there.
Well, today the fastest computer in the world is in Japan, and I have a fondness for that nation, but also a highly competitive nature, so I'm delighted that we're going to retake the high ground on this. And given where the world is headed in computing, I think it's more than fitting that we be a leader in the world and that Tennessee be at the forefront there. Speaking of Tennessee, I'd like to share with you some insights from my predecessor, Senator Lamar Alexander. I know a good friend of the chair and many people on this committee. He's talked with me at length about what he's called the Oak Ridge Corridor. It's a way to capture the tremendous brainpower that exists in Oak Ridge and the surrounding area. In fact, when you land at the Knoxville Airport near Oak Ridge, it welcomes you as the gateway to the Smokies and to the Oak Ridge Corridor. It's something I think that we should market as an innovation hub. We have such incredible technologies. We draw from the federal government. We draw from my alma mater, Vanderbilt University, from the University of Tennessee, from the Tennessee Valley Authority, state and private industry. What I'd like to ask you is what role you see, Secretary Granholm, the department playing as we recreate innovation hubs like the Oak Ridge Corridor in a way that will support economic growth in underserved communities?
That is a great question. In fact, I was just on a call with all of the lab directors yesterday on this very subject.
Perfect.
Is how how the labs, and some are doing more of this and some are working on it, but how the labs can really connect, whether it's, you've talked about this as being a geographic hub. There may be some communities that are slightly outside of the immediate adjacency that are also underserved that could benefit. So one strategy, of course, involves workforce development. A lot of these labs are looking to develop that STEM pipeline and really want to be in the community to talk about the importance of science, technology, engineering, and math, both, starting in, high school through college, partnering with local colleges, and certainly partnering with the universities that are already there. So pipeline issues are one. Economic development, technology transfer from the labs to, to perhaps sort of technology hubs that are related to lab, but could be commercial, using products that could be commercialized outside of the lab. So we have a fantastic new leader of our Office of Technology Transfer who is really focused on what are those opportunities to create perhaps incubators, either inside the lab structure or outside in adjacency, to be able to create a whole cluster of dynamic innovation, creating an innovation hub in an area that may be seen as often cloistered because it's inside of perhaps fencing, et cetera.
Well, may I extend our invitation to your head of Office of Technology Transfer to join us as well, because we're working very hard in Tennessee to try to create just that type of innovation hub, bringing the private sector together, transferring technology more efficiently. It's hard to do. It always has been hard to do, but if we can find ways to make it more efficient, more effective, I think it has a great potential in terms of leveraging the massive investment we're making in basic research and translating that into applied results that can make a real difference for our economy and keep America at the forefront of innovation.
So if, with your permission, I will have her reach out to your office to do a briefing and discussion with you. Her name is Vanessa Chan. Okay.
Thank you, Madam Secretary. Thank you, Madam Chair.
You.
Senator Murray?
Thank you very much, Chairman Feinstein. Good to see you. Thank you for being here today. Secretary Granholm, let me start with, no surprise to you, the Hanford site in Central Washington. As you know, the federal government has both a legal and a moral obligation to clean up the Hanford site and to work in partnership, of course, with my state of Washington in doing so. I was really pleased to see this year's request, which is a rejection of some of the dangerous cuts that were proposed in the last administration. And I think this year's request is much more realistic and closer to current year enacted levels. So thank you. But that being said, there is a laundry list of projects to be done at RL and ORP, not to mention the tri-party agreement milestones already in place that require substantial funding and prudent financial stewardship. I remain concerned about the long-term projections for this site. A 2019 DOE report estimated that the life cycle cleanup costs could be up to $677 billion, and the work would not be completed until 2078. If those numbers are accurate, it would mean an average annual appropriation over $11 billion a year for the next 57 years. That is a long ways off the roughly $2.5 billion it's funded at right now. Do you have any thoughts for us on if there are opportunities to bring down these life cycle costs while still safely and effectively and in compliance with the tri-party agreement and other legal requirements to completing this cleanup?
Yeah, this is a great question because obviously as we progress in our research and development, new strategies become available that we might not know of right now. There is a lot of work being done at the labs, as I'm sure you're aware, on how to best contain, how to reduce, how to mitigate, et cetera. And we're looking at that all the time. Right now, I don't have the silver bullet that would bring it, down to a much lower funding level at a much shorter time. What I can tell you is that we, and I appreciate you acknowledging that this is in fact the highest amount we've ever asked for cleanup at Hanford, but we've got a lot of work to do. I'm glad we've been able to achieve some milestones. I look forward to coming to celebrate some of those milestones, but milestones are just that. It's not the end goal. And so it's our desire as well to accelerate. It's our desire to find solutions that are less costly but also safe. The point is, we will continue to work with you and the community, which is really important to us, that we do it in partnership and not in opposition with the community so that we can achieve our mutual goals.
Well, thank you for that, and of course, we will be working with you on that goal. Let me turn to a related Hanford question, the payment in lieu of taxes, PILT. This year's request specifically proposed to eliminate PILT funding, and just for the Hanford and Savannah River DOE sites, PILT funding is intended to compensate local governments for taxes they cannot collect because the land is federal property. And they use that money to support their schools, their hospitals, their libraries, emergency services, things like that. I've heard a lot of great things about your and the department's support for communities adjacent to DOE sites, so that was really surprising to me and just not acceptable. PILT funding has long been an issue here, and I want to be clear, it can't be eliminated or cut back in any way. The Tri-Cities really rely on that funding, and they are owed this funding as a result of the sacrifices and commitments that community made during World War II. It's simply not their fault that hundreds and hundreds of square miles in Washington State are not taxable, lowering their ability to fund basic services. So can you explain to me what DOE's rationale for proposing to eliminate PILT payments and why were Hanford and Savannah Rivers specifically targeted?
I would say that I know that historically the department presents a budget that doesn't include PILT, and that Congress, that your leadership insists that it's included. And all I want to say is I look forward to working with you on that.
Oh, okay. We'd like to see it in the budget.
I understand.
Let me just finish by saying I really want to thank you for spending some time with the Pacific Northwest National Lab during your virtual visit.
Yeah.
I hope you can come and visit in person someday. They are really a leader in climate science, and I was really pleased to see the robust funding increases to the Biological and Environmental Research Program, as well as the final year funding for the grid storage launchpad. They're a leader nationally in the fight against climate change. And I really look forward to working with you on that. So thank you for that.
Likewise. Thank you.
And Senator Coons, thank you for graciously allowing me to go ahead of you. Thank you.
Thank you, Senator. Senator Coons?
I believe it's Senator Hovind's turn.
Yeah. Yes, Senator Coons.
Fine, Senator Hovind, thank you. I'm happy to take the opportunity. Thank you, Chairwoman Feinstein, and in absentia, Ranking Member Kennedy. Thank you, Senator Granholm and Dr. Verdun for testifying. And Madam Secretary, it's great to be with you in person, and I am so grateful for the job you've been doing as part of the Jobs Cabinet, helping the American people understand the connection between combating climate and creating good, high-paying jobs. I enthusiastically support the President's vision, particularly with regards to the Department's budget, and look forward to making sure that it's adequately funded to meet the challenges of this century. Just a few things I might. First, on carbon capture, utilization, and storage, I was encouraged to see a revitalized Office of Fossil Energy and Carbon Management. CCUS is a critical part of our strategy for moving forward. I have a bill with Senator Cassidy, the SCALE Act, which would support wide-scale CCUS deployment by connecting sites of carbon dioxide capture to places where they can be, where it can be stored, and it would create thousands of jobs. Could you briefly discuss the importance of carbon dioxide transport and storage infrastructure for both meeting our climate and job creation goals?
Yeah, thank you for asking this, because I think it is, I agree with you. It is very important. It's important for the U.S., and I would say it's important around the globe. There's a lot of our allies across the world who want to know how they can take this kind of technology and affordably use it. So it's one of the reasons why the American Jobs Plan had in it these 10 projects, demonstration projects for carbon capture, use, and sequestration, because the point is you can use it on a variety of different carbon sources, whether it's heavy industry, whether it's power plants, and we want to be able to show that it can be done, that it can be taken to scale, that it's affordable, and that it solves the problem. So thank you for your leadership in it. Our Fossil Energy and Carbon Management Office currently has 5 demonstration projects running. One of them, Project Tundra. One of them, we want to make sure that we continue to demonstrate that that ability. The 5 is great, but we need more to be able to take this to, and we need it quickly. We need to, because these are big projects. And let me just say one other thing is the American Jobs Plan is called Jobs Plan for a reason, which is that this kind of technology, especially with the pipelines that need to be installed, et cetera, is a huge job creator. So it's a win-win, and it makes sure that fossil communities are not left behind.
Senator Cassidy had an interesting perspective on it. He said, I've got lots of folks in Louisiana today working on building and maintaining and servicing pipelines that pull things out of the ground and put them into our economy. Why can't the same folks have jobs building and maintaining and servicing pipelines that take carbon dioxide and put it back out under the ground and store it permanently? A simple but powerful insight, I think. Let's move towards one of the things that I think is a key component of a clean energy economy, hydrogen. The department recently announced its Hydrogen Shot initiative to bring down the cost of clean hydrogen. You traveled to Texas to visit an Air Liquide facility there. Their, I would say, preeminent research facility in North America happens to be in Newark, Delaware. We'd love to have you come visit there as well. And Air Liquide is teaming up with Bloom Energy and Chemours in Delaware to look at the future of clean hydrogen. Could you just talk about your vision for the role of hydrogen, particularly in decarbonizing the hard-to-abate sectors like industry and transportation?
I can't emphasize this enough, is that this technology is a technology that can be the game changer for the toughest areas, but also generally. I mean, we want to be able to, for example, right now we can't export renewable energy. We have to use it here. So, but clean hydrogen could do that. It could convert hydrogen into green ammonia and be able to transport it, and the ammonia distribution system globally is already in place. So this is another reason why all of these other countries, I mean, if Senator Haggerty were here, he would know Japan, for example, shutting down their nuclear facilities. They don't have a whole lot of options. And so they're super interested in hydrogen. We've been talking to Australia, who is also doing a lot of experimentation in hydrogen. The American Jobs Plan has 15 demonstration projects that it would fund in clean hydrogen. That's very exciting, whether it's green or blue, and the blue ends up being sequestered. The CO2 ends up being sequestered from natural gas. There's a huge opportunity here for us to create jobs and to lead the world in the solution that could actually allow all of these countries, especially those who have significant fossil communities, to be able to be net carbon zero.
Well, in terms of net carbon zero baseload, I think next generation nuclear is also an important part of the suite of approaches we need to take. Right at the end of last year, something big happened in energy policy. It didn't get much notice because there were other things going on with the election, but Chair Murkowski and Ranking Member Manchin at the time of the Energy Committee finally got passed the Energy Act of 2020. It had a lot of different bills in it. One of them that I'd worked on for years was a modernization of the Weatherization Assistance Program. Another was the Nuclear Energy Renewal Act to sustain our nuclear fleet, but also invest in R&D and advanced nuclear. Could you just discuss briefly the role of nuclear energy in ensuring the balance of decarbonizing baseload power generation and our economy as a whole, and ensuring energy security for the United States?
Yeah, we have to do, I was mentioning before you arrived, I think Senator Hyde-Smith had a similar kind of question, which was, we have got to do both research and development on next generation nuclear, advanced modular, et cetera, and we have to make sure that we keep our existing fleet operating, because the existing fleet provides such a significant part of our clean electricity today. And if we take it offline, it's going to be that much more difficult to get to the goals of net zero as well as 100% clean electricity. In the American Jobs Plan, as you are aware, the Clean Energy Standard includes nuclear, and that would be one way to help the existing fleets maintain their status. A second thing would be to help to subsidize those who are ready to go offline so that they stay up. Those are both important. So both research for the future as well as helping the existing nuclear fleet, those are both really important aspects of what the clean energy mix must entail.
Well, and our national labs are an absolutely critical part of doing this R&D. I look forward to supporting the appropriations requested for the national labs, both in nuclear technology and in clean energy technology more broadly. I appreciate the indulgence of the chair. and very much look forward to working with you both. Thank you, Madam Secretary.
Thank you, Senator Hoven.
Thank you, Madam Chair. And I'm actually, Madam Secretary, going to pick up right where Senator Coons left off, and that's referencing the Energy Act of 2020. And you actually have touched on some of the things in your responses to him that I wanted to go into for just a minute. That legislation actually included 6 carbon capture projects, including 2 retrofits of coal-fired plants. You mentioned one, which is the Minn Kota plant and Project Tundra, where DOE has already provided, I think, more than $43 million. The company's put in a lot, and the state of North Dakota's put a lot of money in, and they are effectively moving forward on large-scale carbon capture. And so I just want to ask that if you support those carbon capture demonstration projects and are committed to seeing them through, because it's a huge endeavor, huge undertaking. And in fact, Mac McLennan, the CEO of the company, will be here today because in our energy subcommittee of the full energy committee, he's testifying on carbon capture and talking about Project Tundra. And of course, that's one of the projects we want to take and show you, in August when you come to visit.
Great. Well, yes, I support that. The carbon safe, which is where the demonstration projects come out of for fossil energy and carbon management, we are asking for a 48% increase in that budget to be able to continue and further those demonstration projects and add to them. But I will say, if we were able to get this funding in the Infrastructure American Jobs Plan, that there would be a significant more funding for carbon capture, which I fully support and I think would be enormously helpful to getting not just to net zero, but to also making sure that these communities are able to continue to function.
Right, and the key pieces there are, it's the front-end investment, like we're talking with Carbon Safe and Project Tundra, those kind of things. It's the loan guarantees, which you have, and also rural utility services have, and then it's enhancements to 45Q and 48A.
Right.
So I agree that very much. If we can include those things in our infrastructure/energy packages, I think that really advances the ball on carbon capture.
Yep, I agree.
The other thing is that you and Senator Coons just talked about is the CO2. So we have projects like we're talking about, fossil-based projects, but we also have biofuels projects that are stripping CO2. And they need these pipelines. For example, in North Dakota, we can put the CO2 down hole, but in Minnesota, Iowa, South Dakota, you can't because you don't have the EPA regulatory regime in place. So they want to build pipelines to bring CO2 up to North Dakota, put it down hole. So how do we get more of these pipelines built? You know how challenging that is to move CO2.
Another opportunity to make sure that the pipelines for CO2, and I would say pipelines eventually for hydrogen, are in the Infrastructure American Jobs Plan that you are negotiating. That too is a huge jobs creator. That too provides solutions. And you, obviously, North Dakota has a unique geology that is positioned to be able to take a lot of that. And I think it's a big opportunity for the state. It's a big opportunity for employment as well.
Right. You need the geology. You need to have the regulatory and legal regime in place. So we're going to have those pipelines to move that, the CO2. So, thank you, Madam Secretary. And then, Dr. Verdon, as far as the W80-4 and also the W87, one of which goes on the LRSO, the other which goes on the new GBSD, update me on the schedules, and are the labs going to be able to keep up? Because as you know, they're developing the rocket systems. The LSO is progressing quite well. Are you going to be on track with the warhead piece?
Right now, we are on track with both the W80-4 and the W87-1, but we do recognize that we have COVID impacts on the 80-4 that we're working with the Air Force. So there's no near-term impacts with that, but there could be a schedule adjustment, but we have a lot of margin if we have to do that. But we haven't reached a final conclusion yet. We're still working with external vendors who we stay in constant contact with about potential delays, again, due to COVID issues in their institutions, as well as our own. So we are studying that, no final answer, but right now everything is on target and we're supporting the services as required.
Both for the W84 and the W87-1.
For both systems, yes.
Okay. Thank you very much. Appreciate it. Thank you, Madam Chair.
Thank you very much. I believe we have another round coming. So, Madam Secretary, please bear with us. I wanted to talk with you just a little bit about the increasing temperatures, the intense heat waves, and Western wildfire really becoming very, very dangerous. Last year in California, 4 million acres burned, 10,000 structures, 5,000 of them homes burned, and 1 out of 10 wildfire ignitions in our state is related to energy equipment, a lot of which, as we know, is decades and decades old. And it's a big state, 40 million people, big geography. What role do you see microgrids, renewables, and distributed power in making power grids more resilient? And I don't know what we do about those things that hit them and spark fires. And maybe you have some thoughts on that, too.
Well, thank you for that. I think microgrids are an important piece of resilience. And so making sure that we have them, especially in areas where we know we continually see problems with the major distributed system, is important. And our grid modernization initiative, the funding that you all have appropriated for that, microgrids are a piece of what we are doing. I also think that it's really important in states like California, states that are above sea level, that we consider undergrounding these wires.
I'm sorry, I missed it. That we consider
undergrounding the wires to the extent possible. It is expensive to underground transmission wires. However, other countries are doing it. We are doing research on it. And we're also doing research on how best to identify in these old grids where the weaknesses are.
So you think, if we could just have a bit of a back and forth.
Yeah.
If you think a state as big as California, geographically as well as population, can have a sufficient new grid structure, I don't see that happening statewide for a long time. There may be some of it. So what I'm looking for are those things that can solve these problems and really prevent fire from happening, if at all possible.
I agree 100%. And I think that microgrids are one piece in some areas. Obviously, there's not a one-size-fits-all solution for a state like California that's so diverse. But you know where the pockets of intense fire problem are. And so in those areas, if we could look at solutions like microgrids, like undergrounding the wires so that they're not exposed to create those sparks and that danger. These solutions like there are AI drones that can identify where the weak spots are on the grid that are have the most fire danger. These are all things that our Office of Electricity and our labs are working on. But we need more investment to make sure that this grid is resilient and particularly targeted to areas where we know we have great problems. Louisiana, we've got a different kind of problem, right? We need to make the grid resilient from hurricanes. We need to make the grid resilient in both places. So, and in Louisiana, in New Orleans, it's below sea level, so you wouldn't consider undergrounding. So a different kind of solution. But the bottom line is, in the bill that's being negotiated, the American Jobs Plan or the Energy Infrastructure Plan, there is a component that has a grid deployment authority that would be under the Department of Energy, where we could really target solutions in a granular way to areas where we know we have the biggest problems, both transmission capacity, resilience, and I would say cyber issues as well. All of them could be, if we centralized at least how these decisions are being made and the technologies to help to address them.
Well, would you be willing to let some of your people take a look at our state?
Oh, yes.
In terms of the grid structure?
Absolutely.
And make some recommendations. Now, obviously, the big problem is cost. And how do you redo an old structure that is huge? And I would certainly welcome any help that we could get from the federal government by way of advice and consultation. And so I'm taking the opportunity of this hearing just to ask if you would be willing to take a look at it.
Of course, absolutely.
Well, thank you very much. I appreciate that. Senator?
Thank you, Madam Chair. Put that up right quick for me. Madam Secretary, does the administration support, if you know, the Strategic Petroleum Reserve?
Yes.
Okay. We've got a lot of vacancies at the Strategic Petroleum Reserve, and if you look at the website, I know this isn't you just got there, but the website says this page was last updated on December 15, 2017.
Wow.
Could you take a look at that for me?
Yes, I certainly will.
My understanding is that they're understaffed there. I've watched you, Madam Secretary, for years on television before you became Secretary. You're very intelligent, and even though I don't always agree with you, you make very cogent arguments. Does your proposed budget include money for geoengineering?
No.
How come?
Well, it's not been a solution that I don't think it does, no, it does not. I think we want to address and mitigate as best we can, adapt where we can, but we don't have geoengineering as part of our budget.
But if there's geoengineering, my understanding of it, it's global cooling. There are things we can do to cool the earth that have based on science. And cloud whitening, for example, that's just one. I mean, it would just seem to me, and there's a whole science out there. There's a lot of private dollars and R&D being spent on geoengineering. And if there's a way to cool the earth without, let's say, destroying the fossil fuel industry, why wouldn't we want to pursue that if the objective is to reduce temperatures?
We are interested in all kinds of technologies to be able to reduce greenhouse gas emissions and to reduce our warming. But I will say, and I wanted to say this to you when you had the first engagement with me, that this administration is interested in carbon capture, use and sequestration, is interested in hydrogen, is interested in direct air capture, is interested in controlling or managing the emissions off of fossil fuels. So I just want you to understand that we are there with you on that.
Yes, and I know you're being truthful and accurate, but there are a lot of members of the administration, I think, that don't see the climate as a discrete scientific problem. They see it as a religion, and they see it as a vehicle through which they can remake American society. And I think they're approaching the issue with more zeal than wisdom. I believe in metrics. I believe in the prudent allocation of scarce resources. You know what I'm talking about. Governors have to balance their budgets. And I believe in metrics. And if we're going to spend, I don't know how many squillion dollars the president lately wants to spend on that we don't have even 5% of on the environment. And I believe in the environment. We all do. We all want clean air and bright water. But at some point you have to judge the expenditure of taxpayer dollars with metrics. And what I worry about is that we're going to turn the American economy upside down. We're going to turn a lot of American lives upside down. We're going to make them a bunch of promises, just like we made them promises with globalization. Don't worry, your life will be better. And think about that when you're in the unemployment line. That's what we told a lot of Americans. That we're going to do this without a big picture in terms of where we're going to end up. Toward that end, let me ask you this question. If you know, and maybe the Undersecretary knows if you don't, because I know you can't know everything, tell me 5 concrete steps that India is taking today to reduce its CO2 emissions.
Well, India is looking at wind, looking at solar, looking at hydrogen, looking at carbon capture, and is trying to replace its coal with natural gas.
I know they're looking at all that stuff. President Xi says they're looking at it too as he continually builds.
Well, no, they are deploying, excuse me, friend, I don't mean to interrupt you, but they are deploying those methods, including distributed strategies like we were discussing, where they don't have to have the grid, but some kind of distributed microgrid.
How much money did Modi spend last year in India
I don't know.
to reduce CO2 emissions?
I don't know, sir. I don't know the answer to that.
Okay. It was under $1 billion, wasn't it?
I don't know the answer.
Okay. What you do is what you believe. Everything else is just conversation. And that's what worries me about this whole approach. Of course, President Xi and Mr. Modi are going to say the right things. But you have to judge people by what they do. And I asked our EPA administrator a few months ago, maybe weeks ago, time kind of runs together. I said, if we pass the president's infrastructure bill, only 5% of which is true traditional infrastructure, the rest is the Green New Deal and other things. How much is it going to reduce CO2 emissions in the world? And he couldn't answer that question. So we're going to spend, how many trillions of dollars, and we don't know what the end game is? That's my problem.
We spent, I believe, $90 billion last year cleaning up after these extreme weather events. Uh-huh. So if we don't take action, it will be far more expensive as these events escalate. I would also say that there is a $23 trillion global market for the products that reduce CO2 emissions, $23 trillion.
Right.
And the question is, are we going to take advantage of that? Can we create economic opportunity for the people who work in the fossil fuel industry to be able to create Energy 2.0 by managing the emissions?
And look, you make very good points, but here's my point. President Biden, I'm going to say it again, President Biden, what's the latest cost of his infrastructure bill? $2.5 trillion?
1.3, I think is what you're negotiating.
Let's call it $2 trillion, to be fair. President Biden says spend $2 trillion. A big chunk of that is the Green New Deal. And my question is very simple. If we spend this money to reduce CO2 emissions, how much is going to be reduced worldwide? Doesn't matter in the United States. It matters the worldwide. And we ought to have an answer to that.
The entire world has signed on to the agreement in Paris.
The entire world's not spending $2 trillion.
The entire world is spending more than that.
The entire world is not. Most of this is lip service. You and I both know it.
That's not what we're seeing. I agree that we have to verify and that we have to make sure that people are living up to their commitments. And that's what these agreements are all about. But I understand your skepticism because you have to verify.
Yes, ma'am. And what I've verified is that we're being asked to spend $2 trillion, and the world's biggest emitter of CO2 is China. The third biggest is India. And their attitude seems to be, go get them. We'll hold your coat while you do that. Meanwhile, President Xi keeps building power plants fueled by coal. and he's been known to reside on the scarce side of being honest. Went way over. I'm in big trouble. I'm sorry.
Thank you very much. Madam Secretary, I want to thank you for your forbearance. I want to just ask one thing that perhaps we might be able to talk about a little bit, and that's the $2.6 billion in funding for the ARPA-E area. And included in the budget is a new request for another ARPA focused on climate. And it's unclear exactly how that would work and why it's needed. And so I'd just like to put that on your agenda. I'm very interested in what the answer is, and if I could get that answer, I would appreciate it very much.
Yes, just briefly, there's $200 million in our budget for this proposed RSPC and $300 million in other agencies. There are 6 other agencies that would be involved. So it would be a cross-departmental effort housed at DOE in partnership with ARPA-E. But the C part means that they would be looking at technologies that impact climate that aren't necessarily energy. So, for example, the items that we were discussing about how to identify ways to mitigate wildfires, how to make communities more resilient, the technologies associated with that, that's what ARPA-C would be looking at in partnership with ARPA-E. We want to negotiate this and work on it with Congress, with the Senate and the House, and it could be that there's a dotted line to both so that they work in tandem with one another because obviously they're related. But the C part, as we are seeing on a regular basis, is really necessary given the increasing amount of these energy events.
Well, let me just say thank you for that. Perhaps we could meet and with some of your staff, develop that a little bit further. I'm very worried about what the weather brings for the West Coast, and obviously particularly the biggest state there, and 40 million people, and a lot of old infrastructure, very little of which in this area is new, I find. What do we do for the future? So that's long range, and I wouldn't ask you to respond to that now, but if you would ask your people to look at that, and if we could have a meeting and discuss it, I would be very grateful.
Great. You got it.
Thank you. And thank you for being here, and your staff as well. The hearing record will remain open for 10 days. Senators may submit additional information or questions for the record within that time if they would like. And the subcommittee requests that all responses to questions for the record be provided within 30 days of receipt. So, Madam Secretary, it's wonderful to see you. Thank you for being here.
Thank you so much.
Meeting is adjourned.